Do you think that when we move the conversation to any kind of abduction movement under load, so machine versus cable, similar thought process in making that selection? On a machine, you should be able to send it. You should be able to get the nastiest pump on machine abductions, um, as opposed to something like cable abduction. Putting those head to head, what are the limiting factors? Where would it make more sense to have one versus the other?
I honestly, I think that they can cooperate within the same program because of what you said. One is just it's so if we're doing abduction, I mean the glute sort of does that. It's more into glute med as the targeted muscle in this case, and we're getting into the realm of like a regional hypertrophy sort of mindset, not only from the perspective of delineating from say glute max into glute med, but even fiber orientation. So let's really quick refresh the idea: regional hypertrophy and fiber orientation of muscle, and trying to align the resistance with the fiber orientation of the muscle. So let's do whatever the naked man that is all just muscle on every anatomical chart slash, I'm pretty sure it's like an actual piece of art. I don't know. It's late in the day, but all muscle striations. That's the lines. That's the fiber orientation. Muscle striations. Just another way of thinking about it, right? That's kind of telling you if we are to align the resistance of the exercise more directly with them, there's probably a more direct transfer of force because it doesn't have to turn corners, doesn't have to do anything crazy. It's more the most direct stimulus or resistance to those fibers. You can also place yourself in positions that through the length tension relationship or just sheer leveraging make certain muscle groups have probably a better recruitment profile than others. It's called neuromechanical matching. The muscle that has the greatest degree of leverage is theorized to be recruited first through motor unit recruitment. It doesn't mean that other muscles won't be recruited, but those get recruited first to the party. And when they fail to do the job, other associated muscles will also help take up the brunt of the effort. So, seated abduction machine, send it. Just load it because it's already stabilized. It's got a fixed range of motion. There's not a whole lot you can do to sort of change that fact. Cable based work is where we start to draw in, okay, this is a really long term play that I don't think people recognize when they start to have the nitty gritty, nuanced, optimal regional hypertrophy discussion. Is that I don't think I have to explain this to you or your audience, but muscle takes a long, arduous time to grow. It's a giant pain in the ass. Enhanced, non-enhanced, it doesn't matter. This is a lifelong venture to get to the semblance of a physique that you want, be it just your ideal physique, a competitive physique, anything. You're looking years and years of investment down the road to then scale it to a region. All right, I need this area of my glutes, my glute med, for example, and then be like, now let's be super nitty gritty, super smart. Use a cable where I can specifically line up my setup and execution to most directly attack this one line of fibers. That might work. It probably does. There's a lot of supporting theories and evidence that say that regional hypertrophy is definitely a thing. Neuromechanical matching probably makes sense as a thing. So we can target more specific areas and then leverage them to be the most ideal muscle group to get recruited first. But how does that compare to just sending it? Well, either one of those scenarios requires a long-term play within your program to maybe see the appreciable benefits of being so nitty-gritty. So the glute med is a stabilizer of your hips. Your split squats, your RDLs of any variety, anything on one foot, anything that you have to internally stabilize yourself, it's a barbell or a dumbbell, will over the long-term play call upon your glute med to stabilize your pelvis, stabilize your hip rather. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to maximally grow, but it's not going to not grow either. When you're trying to make a selection on how to bring it up, your structure, your genetic profile, what you need most, if it's a clear and obvious, not getting hit by just straight up abduction machines, cables for most people is a really strong candidate, either at the same time or instead of. But you need to be consistent with whatever choice you use, because what's going to be consistent in your program? A lunge, a split squat, a leg press, a squat pattern, a hinge. The big rocks will always be there, and that's why you see major glute max development. But glute med development needs just as long of a duration of time because otherwise it's getting its primary stimulation through stabilization. It's like planking and having your core change its size or shape. It definitely works early days. And if you do it long enough, like um, male competitors or just men in general, uh, forearm training, some guys just have fucking forearms. And it's some of it's genetic and some of it's just from squeezing barbells and dumbbells and the machines for like 20 years. Is that the route you want to take with your glute med? I mean, me, I have no real obsession with my glute med in particular, so I'm not doing kickbacks. I'll do my lunges and and whatever else, right? If you're a stage competitor, okay, the selection you make, depending on your genetic layout, uh, your particular goals and your program and all the other things that are going around with it, make your choice. I would honestly choose the route if we're going to be a long-term play of a cable so you can be most specific to your goals or to your body, but it probably lingers there and you have to treat it like progressive overload like everything else. You can't just be like 3 sets at 15 at RPE. I did it, guys. It's done. You got to try because that's a small muscle group that needs very precision setup and execution. But like all muscles, they're pains in the ass and require a lot of time to grow.
I think one of the biggest limiters that I see with the cable abduction, in what you're describing, someone having it in their program long term, is that oftentimes in that pursuit of whether it be stimulus or even just completion of my 3 sets of 20 to 25 reps, whatever it is, the repeatability rep to rep sometimes crumbles. I know for a lot of individuals, even just the setup with the cable abduction, okay, well, does that working leg, do I need to be internally rotated? Do I need to have all the way down to the heel, pointed towards where the cable, I guess, is coming out from? Does the foot need to be in the front? Does it need to be in the back? A lot of times what I see athletes coming to me with is, oh, my training is good. I've been doing it. It works for me. Don't need any assistance with this. Yet when I review videos, I'm looking at a set of 15 or 20 and I'm like, okay, the first 10 look wildly different than the last 10. And maybe there even is the intentional shift in position where we're coming out with the working leg slightly behind the non-working leg, whereas the last half of that set, we're even coming back towards more of like a 45-degree hybrid abduction kickback type variation. So I think at least like everything that I'm gathering, and I hope listeners have gathered from you as well, is like it can have a place, it can serve a purpose, but I think you need to be intentional with what you want those reps to look like and how you plan to progress within that phase.
I would say that's bang on. And my recommendation is pauses. Glute kickbacks, cable kickbacks, they're very similar to lateral raises of literally every denomination. You hit a threshold of weight where it effectively becomes nearly impossible to progress with weight. It's just that's the roll of the dice. That's the leveraging. You're not getting above 12.5 arbitrary units of weight on whatever cable stack, whatever it is, right? Add pauses to things. I'm notorious with this with actually trap and rhomboid work as well, because the quality of movement for most people most of the time is probably the biggest rock they have within all their programming. Intensity of effort is something that is like a close second, like truly getting to failure. But the goal is the highest quality movement getting to failure at the end of the day. So something like a kickback, using pauses on every rep, as long as you need them to ensure the same replicated movement pattern, range of motion, but also excursion. So again, start to finish range of motion of that targeted muscle tissue is tremendously powerful. Like that's low key. A lot of my clients that might listen to this or whatever, their back work is all full of pauses because I need you to get your arms in a certain position. I need your traps and I need your rhomboids to actually pull your scaps all the way back to that certain position and stop half-assing it. Eventually, we don't need to do that. It's similar to the tempo discussion. But glute kickbacks, two biggest criteria to make sure they're actually as effective as you can make them be: the quality of the repetition, the replicatability of the repetition. So add pauses every single time, 1 to 2 second count in your head, vicious squeeze, because that means you got through the full range of motion of that very small muscle group. But anchor the top part. One of the biggest pitfalls that I'm sure you have seen, I have seen, we've probably both experienced in some capacity. when the upper body starts to move as the lower body tries to complete the repetition. So what that looks like is a small of the back arching or an anterior pelvic tilt. And essentially, like the short version of all of exercise is you need one side of the muscle anchored such that the other side of the muscle can contract and shorten against it. So if we're using the glutes themselves, we need you to have core engagement and maybe even like lock an arm out against the machine, really post up and lock yourself in a certain position such that your upper body, the positioning of it is not influenced by you trying to contract your lower body. Lock your upper in a certain position, be very specific with core engagement such that moving only through the glute med is what happens, as opposed to the glute med struggles to contract as you go through this anterior pelvic tilt as well. You want your pelvis stabilized in a very specific position as the leg moves as the glute med contracts itself. So pause work every rep to assure you got full range of motion and anchor the shit out of your upper body.